lead us in pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clausen? Ms. Nyberg?
Here.
Dr. Bridges?
Here.
Mr. Jester?
Here.
Ms. Edwards?
Here.
Colonel Curtis?
Here. Item number 4, special guests, special recognitions.
Yes, with your permission, I would like to introduce a special person that's with us today. I wasn't 100% that she'd be able to make it, so I did not add her to the list. Monday, we hired a new executive director of finance, and I would like to introduce Miss Elizabeth Brown Hill to everybody.
All right.
Give the board, of course, if you have anything you want to ask Ms. Brown Hill, she's here and ready, and Diane's got her back if she can't. We got a tough board, so. But Ms. Brown Hill, 14 years, Moore Public Schools. I didn't realize this, but Moore is now twice the size of Lawton.
Yeah.
27,000 students and growing. So I did not realize they had grown that much. Just in the last 5 years, it's amazing. She's worked in virtually every department on the business side, from personnel to payroll, to accounts receivable, account payable, finance. She's got a degree in accounting, and is it next year or sometime next year, she will finish, this year, she will finish her master's degree in forensic accounting.
Awesome.
And so,
And when did she start?
she starts on May 7th.
Nice. Oh, okay.
And we have, I have placed, because she's going to be going back and forth, I've approved some reimbursement for travel in the interim. And also, yes, some other, to help her with the transition. But again, Elizabeth, if you have any questions for Elizabeth, here she is.
I was about to say, welcome.
Yes.
Glad you're here.
Happy to be here.
Good to have you.
And as I was, everywhere I go in this state, when I talk to anybody in finance, when I met the director, the CFO of Moore Public Schools, Miss Branstedter's reputation precedes her everywhere she goes. I mean, she is, everybody knows that we have been in excellent hands. And so, not putting a lot of pressure on you, Elizabeth, a little bit of pressure. So we've got big shoes to fill, but again, I think it's going to be a
Well,
great
we
transition.
appreciate Diane hanging around to help us out, to make that transition.
That's great.
You have family that's moving here with you?
I have two boys that are moving with me, 11 and 12.
Oh, great.
And my 25-year-old on the fence. So he's thinking about relocating as well.
Oh, super.
Okay.
We're glad to have y'all.
Thank you.
That's all I had for special guests.
Okay, departmental reports.
Under departmental reports, we had item 5A, of course. If there aren't any questions over the updates, I'll move on. And for the sake of time, item 5B, 5C, and 5D, I would like to recommend we have no action on tonight. Just need a little bit more. I don't think the policy will change, but I think there are some meetings with some groups and booster clubs that will help before we adopt it.
Okay. Item 6, report of the superintendent.
We have 5A.
5E.
Your calendar, dear.
Now check, does that work if we just move over them all at once? Okay. Item 5E, this is a proposed calendar. This calendar really hasn't changed. We had a little extra time to review it. So now Ms. Ellis is not here, so I'm going to do my best to answer the questions. But one thing that we are going to just go ahead and give the board kind of a fair warning. One request that has come out in recent weeks is that we consider adding Election Day as a day out. I'm going to recommend that go to PBDC so they really jump in and analyze that. That change could impact not only this calendar, which is a year from now, but also the calendar for the upcoming year. It would likely mean one of the Fridays in April or May would be eliminated, but I've heard strong feedback from staff, and I think some of you have as well, about the possibility of Election Day in November being a day out, so people can.
That's the day after Veterans Day this year.
Yes, that's a complication for this year, but we have, wish we could observe Veterans Day on Tuesday. Veterans Day is a big deal in Lawton,
Yeah,
rightfully so.
Yeah,
So
that's why I said it'd be a 2-day weekend.
PPDC will review it and bring us a recommendation.
They'll review that this year or
Yes,
in
and at
August?
their next meeting, I'm going to ask Dr. Polk to ensure that they take a look at it. She's way ahead of me. So at this moment, I would recommend that we adopt the calendar as stated, but I want everybody to realize there may be an update coming forth.
So moved.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Colonel Curtis?
Here.
Just say yes. Patty made the motion, I seconded.
Okay, report of superintendent.
I only have 2 items under mine, and the first item is discussion regarding district requests for proposals, guidance for superintendent staff regarding guidelines and possible policy additions and changes. And in the information in the board packet, I explained how requests for proposals more than once in the last year have caused a little bit concern with people. An RFP, and I did include the policy for the board that covers our policy regarding bids and quotes. You know, the state has very clear guidelines regarding bids for construction and building, repairs, maintenance, those sorts of things. And then our own board policy requires anything above $7,500 to have quotes. Anything below that, $750 to $749, they have to have at least 3 quotes. Well, after $7,500, it's actually a sealed bid process through the purchasing department. But those items, all of those items in our policy currently cover either construction items or construction services, building-related services, or things we are buying, like a computer. Buy 1,000 computers, we're going to get, by policy, we're going to get bids and quotes. And we do have services, however, that crop up quite a bit. I could think of really just dozens of them. Maybe it's a consulting service, maybe it's a service that has to do with we've had video services, we've had different, just a variety of things that don't fall into any of those other guidelines that we do request for proposals for, RFPs. Some people actually call them RFQs as well, a request for quotes, but quotes, RFQ for me is more of an architect term, request for qualifications. So to me, it's the same issue. But what we want to discuss today, make sure, A, that the board understands the purpose and need in RFPs, how we do them and why we do them. When sometimes it's I remember when we did the security systems in the high schools, RFPs were given out because we didn't know exactly what was available. We could have put out a quote for this type of security system or this type, and we did not, we could have limited ourselves. So in an RFP, and I remember other services, it gives the vendor an opportunity to propose a plan that we may never have thought of. So the RFP process is really the first step in the negotiation. And then after that, we have an opportunity to mix and mingle and update before we make a final decision. But an RFP is a good process when we're not exactly sure what is available, or B, it's not under one of these other, but it's a significant project, so services and et cetera. I wanted to make sure, A, that the board understood how we use them and how we have, and I think we've been pretty successful in most cases in using that. But B, the second thing would be, do we want to think of or consider establishing or discuss, and I think this is a longer conversation than one board meeting, establishing some sort of minimum criteria like we do with bids and proposals. It gets extremely complicated. But I think it's something that the board should discuss at some level. We have minimums for construction, $50,000. We have minimum to our bids internally, $7,500. Do we want to say, if it doesn't fall under one of these other policies that we attached in the agenda, does an RFP, we want to have an RFP after X number of dollars, et cetera. So that's really the kind of the question and discussion Mr. Jester and I met. We really wanted to make sure that we covered those items and see what the board had any discussion or thoughts, what we should do. any direction for us as we're working through this as a staff.
Are we, when making change, I always like to think about whether or not we're actually solving a problem that exists. Is there a problem here that we're trying to solve, or what would be the purpose of creating new policy?
That's a good question. When people ask us what our threshold is for an RFP, I can't answer them. Currently, it is really a judgment call,
Okay.
which in most cases, since I've been here in the last 5 years, has really been very successful. But we have had at least 2 cases in the last couple of years where it was not as cut and dried, and people questioned what are the criteria. I think the nature of RFPs, I would just request if we do set a minimum criteria, it's a relatively high threshold because we've got a lot of services, and like Ed Services is constantly pulling in. I think we did RFPs when we did the student information system. Yes, because we had to decide between, what do we use now? It popped out of my head. Infinite Campus. We compared several of them because we didn't know what they offered. We did the same with our website services, which was a smaller, and Lynn Cordes helped that process. But, so it's been very successful. It's just the question for me really is, do we want to establish a minimum criteria for it?
I think the other thing that we're concerned about is we want to make sure that we give local vendors an opportunity to provide services that aren't covered under these other policies. And, you know, in order to do that, maybe we need to set some criteria so that staff, you know, will know that this is going to be put out for RFP regardless of any other existing relationships or reasons that they may have for wanting to, you know, just extend the contract or give it to.
Gives them an
certain
opportunity,
vendors.
So-
they feel like they get an opportunity to bid.
Can I try to read between the lines? Is it a scenario where, like, hypothetically, there's a service that we're paying for, and then there's local people who provide something similar who would like an opportunity to bid for something that we're doing? Okay, understood.
And sometimes, sometimes we may not honestly be completely aware of what has developed locally.
Sure.
Or what has evolved locally.
Absolutely.
And when we fail to do an RFP, we do risk that happening.
Yep.
I think it also limits us as a district, because if there are newer things out there and we're not
Right.
opening up for it, and this would be something that would have to be done annually or not?
Well, the contract would be a whole separate
Right.
issue. The RFP is what helps us build our information into entering into the contract.
So that might be like a second part of it. If we do that, are we going to have to ask for an RFP every year, every 2 years? I mean, I think that might be
Continue
part,
services, you mean?
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because we have to renew the contracts annually. They can't be more than a year, but, you know, how often are we going to do the RFPs?
I think that would be part of the contractual in the nature of the service. I'm going to use our bidding, you know, I think this is the year we do a lot of bidding for our services. And for a lot of our supplies, custodial and stuff, it may not be, but I can't remember. Some services, because of the nature of the service, if you're providing XYZ service, some of them require, because it's such a huge, sometimes an investment in capital or in equipment, and therefore
Personnel.
vendors like to have a 2 or 3 year commitment, which I think is fair. Because we run into this, why don't we just do 1-year contracts? Well, some people aren't going to enter into a 1-year contract for us. The school board at any time, at any year, can cancel any contract.
Right.
Virtually, there's only one exception. With vendors, we can always cancel a lease purchase or a contract. There may be expenses associated with it, but then again, on the other hand, it's not necessarily it doesn't happen very often, because once a district makes that commitment, then other vendors will be thinking, I'm not going to enter a 3-year contract with them because it doesn't mean anything. And so there are a lot of examples, and I'm trying not to mention any particular area because, you know, you can imagine if we're going to hire a special fishing fleet to deliver our students that live on the river, they might have to buy an extra few boats. So therefore, they're not going to do that for a one-year contract, or if they do, it's going to be exorbitantly expensive.
And hire people to fix those.
Yes, so it becomes an issue. And so I do believe multi-year contracts are very beneficial to a district. But I think I would never, ever, unless the circumstances were pretty dire, even recommend to the board that we cancel a continuing contract. But the provision within the law, and Mr. Wade and I discussed this earlier, it's pretty clear, if you don't have, at any time, this board cannot bind next year's board to that decision. And I think that's it's a good balance. We always have the ability to get out of it, but there would be ramifications to our reputation if we did so, without some good reason.
So can we ask you to look into this and figure out what a threshold number might be? And then we could take action on it at another meeting?
I think, and the other question would be is I don't want to get a very verbose, lengthy, incredibly complex. I think we look at what other districts do, but I think I would be comfortable coming up with a good threshold, which I think would work. We can look at what we'll do is we'll look at RFPs that we've had and contracts that we've done that could have, should have, or would have gone through an RFP process. And in light of the amounts that we currently have in place for other processes and bids, services and buildings, et cetera, that I'd feel good about our staff doing that. I think we can get it in place by July 1.
Dean, I think it would be helpful in the process that we also see to it that all the vendors understand this, this ability of the board to get out of any contract that purports to bind it beyond a year, because the general vendor out there and vendor number 1 or 21, they never have heard of those, or they never have been discussed in the past. So as part of the process, I think we need to make sure that that is clearly understood going in, so that a vendor won't be caught in that situation. We need to protect the vendor's interests just like we do ours.
I would personally love to see that we have a document that is attached to any of those contracts that are asking for multi-year commitments.
They understand the risk.
Yeah,
reality.
so that the vendor understands the risk and the reality of the fact that this board can't bind another board over it.
Well, most national companies that I've dealt with in the past are well aware of that, but it would surprise you at some that I've seen that you would think that they ought to expect this, understand this, and so forth, but they just don't. They just, I don't know whether they ignore it, don't want to play like it, that they ever heard about it, but and the national company has heard about this because it's the prevalent law in most states. I mean, I haven't done a survey, obviously, but I know in talking to, in visiting with people from other states, they have similar provisions in their state laws too, in dealing with public bodies, school districts, and so municipalities and so forth.
Well, I think that's a separate policy issue, but I think it's also really not a policy issue. What we just need to do is I'll work with Ms. Ralph. She's gone today. I'll work with her when she gets back about getting that form.
Just a disclaimer.
And it has the state law as quoted, that way and people understand, you know, but people need to be aware. It gives us freedom and flexibility, but everything has a trade-off. So I think it's a good thing. If we don't have that in place, I think we'd get it in place.
Very good.
But I will try to, I'm not sure we'll have this the second board meeting in May, but prior to July 1, we'll have policy recommendation for you.
Very good.
Any more questions on that? Or discussion?
I think we're good.
All right. We have a lot of announcements, and there's superintendent's announcements. We'll start the one that is actually a recognition Cynthia Walker brought this to us in our meeting today. I can't remember which meeting it was. But our district leadership meeting, yes. We had several people that were there. But we were recognized, Lawton Public Schools has been recognized as an Oklahoma Certified Healthy Business.
Hey,
We actually got an award, and so in the past, we've been recognized for progress and for different things, but we have been actually certified now as a healthy business. So we've got a Healthy Schools Initiative now, healthy business. I think it's significant that the board, and one of our guiding principles is healthy and fit lifestyles. So I think that's important. We're not there where we need to be, but I think that's an important thing for us to share. So, and I think Ms. Walker and Ed Services had a big part to do with that. A couple things is I don't know if everybody realizes it, but each year we pick a student chef through our food services, Mr. Dyer. They were filming, and I got to actually taste the food the other day. It was a lettuce wrap. It was awesome.
Asian.
But Pioneer Park fifth grader Julissa Roca is competing in the National Future Chef competition. There'll be a voting opportunity, so she made Asian chicken lettuce wrap and tofu caprese skewers.
Wow.
wow.
It just tasted yummy. I didn't know what it was. It was just yummy.
But you'll let us know when it's time to vote, right?
And that's coming up, and so Lynn's gonna get it on
It's on
Facebook.
Facebook already.
All right.
On there.
Okay.
I need to add it to my morning message and everybody vote every day, so
Yeah.
that would be great, because they worked hard on that video.
Really do.
It was.
You haven't gotten to go to that, it's just so much fun, because you get to taste all the food, the kids are.
And this is one of those things that, thank goodness, and Mr. Dyer and your staff for not letting it fall between the cracks over the last few weeks. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
He made sure this happened, so. And I also want to do a shout out to Central Middle School's girls golf team, took first place at the Marlowe Junior High Golf Tournament. It's Coach Tom McDonald's, and Central Middle School is the only middle school competing against 10 other junior highs. So it included, in small districts, you run into this a lot. Middle school students competing against junior high students, ninth graders who technically qualify for high school teams. So it's a big deal. So I want to shout out to them. A couple quick announcements. In the agenda today, the board, we will be approving or disapproving, unless you pull it from the consent agenda, MacArthur High School cafeteria renovation. Again, Mr. Dyer, Mr. Smith, the architects, worked really hard on that. With Mr. Elam's staff, I met with them prior. That's a big deal. That was promised in 2004. We're finally getting it done. So that's
And you're recommending a patio, I believe.
yes, yes,
Instead of the
yes,
interior.
yeah. Eisenhower Middle School, we will have a groundbreaking in May. Miss Mattingly is coordinating that. I think we probably would have had it a little earlier, but
Yeah.
we've had a busy month. Safe rooms also, each safe room will have a groundbreaking at their site also in May. So prior to the end of the school, we'll have our groundbreaking. In addition to the Eisenhower Middle School, we will have a 95% review for the board once we get to that point. Before we put the middle school out to bid this time, this is a big project, there's a lot of eyes on it. The board will review it with the architect before we put it out for
So
bid.
he's gonna come and do the remodeling, okay, good.
I want to make sure the board understands every component, that the board, I don't want there to be any doubt as we move through.
Lockers, no lockers, all that.
Found the
kind of
toilets.
stuff.
Right, so that might be a long meeting, but I think it's
We
worth
workshopped
at
that,
this
I think,
point,
the
yeah.
last time we did that, yeah.
And I think, we're gonna cover, big one, textbooks. We haven't had a board meeting for like 3 years.
I saw the math.
At the last board meeting, I mentioned that we would do 2 subjects this year. We're gonna do 3 subjects this year. Math, social studies, and science. The math resources we bought last year, after a week, we tried it. Teachers have overwhelmingly said, no, we need this resource in a different form. So we're moving forward with that. I think it's a commitment. It didn't cost us any money to try what we tried last year. The manipulators we bought for the classrooms are still in place. They still need them. So it was something we tried for a year, but I think the math teachers overwhelmingly said we need a different set of resources. Those resources will still be there, but this is a situation. So I think that's significant for the district. We will have gotten all our core subjects caught up in 2 years.
When you say we're gonna do 3 more subjects, what do you mean by that? What grades are we talking?
We're going to adopt math, science, and social studies for all grades this year for the upcoming years. So that is,
Grades.
yes, elementary, middle school, and high school.
Math, science, and social studies.
Yeah, science and social studies gets extremely complicated because we have different levels.
Yeah,
Math is a little, but again, in the secondary levels, it becomes a really complicated issue. But having, we've got a lot of teachers that are new, emergency certified, et cetera. We really need to get these resources in place. We have a few $1 million, but we'll get it. Any questions about my announcements? All right, that's the end of my report.
okay. Do we have items we need to remove from the consent agenda?
I do. I need to remove item 7F3A, simply for clarification. So it's under item 7F3A, the MacArthur Middle School lockers. Hold on.
The sale of the locker.
I gave the wrong number, help me.
3A.
That's 3A, that's what.
Basketball
That's the
lockers.
basketball lockers?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
MacArthur High
School.
Scars. I was reading, yes, that is correct, MacArthur High School. Other than that,
You ready for the balance? I'll move for the balance of the consent agenda.
Hold on just a moment.
Did you need something right
Do
now?
we need to remove that one item,
Did you need something?
the bid
No,
for
the Lincoln change order,
the Lincoln change order?
we can, and I can offer an explanation and help the board.
Okay, I think that,
Just for further clarification, we'll just pull it out.
wonder what that
It
was.
is,
So 7F3A plus the change order for,
Lincoln is 7F1A, right?
Yes.
there you go,
7F1A.
All right.
7F3A and
All
7F1A.
right, I'll move for the rest of the consent agenda.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth,
Yes.
Dr. Bridges,
Yes.
Mr. Jester,
Yes.
Ms. Edwards,
Yes.
Ms. Bentley, can I go ahead and go in the order I recommended them in? Okay. I think item 7F3A is a very simple, just amendment to the recommendation. We have not been able to determine decisively where those lockers were purchased from, and so we cannot, until we know exactly and can confirm they were purchased from activity fund monies, we cannot deposit into activity fund. So I would just like to make a recommendation that we adopt that, that we approve it with the understanding that we will have to determine the appropriate fund to deposit those funds into. Well, I do believe at this moment it will be activity fund, but we have to be able to substantiate that. What I don't want to do is slow down MacArthur High School from moving forward.
Move for approval.
Second.
I'm sorry,
I did.
Dr. Bridges. Ms. Nyworth,
Yes.
Dr. Bridges,
Yes.
Mr. Jester,
Yes.
Ms. Edwards.
Yes.
Now, Lincoln.
Okay. On item 7F1A, which deals with the change order, I think the board knows I don't like change orders, but this is one that's unavoidable, and I have a lengthy explanation from the architect before me, and the nutshell version is that the city of Lawton did not allow those classrooms to serve as corridors once they were no longer as exit corridors in the case of an emergency. And so therefore, their city, their inspectors, however they came through, that they would allow them to be corridors as long as we had fire alarms. I don't think in a functional sense it impedes anything, but we're talking about, in order to make these things work, it's I think it's a $12,000 change order. But I think
16. yeah.
16.
Yeah.
I think under the circumstances, I asked the architect, why wasn't this seen or predicted beforehand in a design phase? And again, it's one of those things that it was not something they could have foreseen, I don't believe.
Contingency, though.
Yeah, it comes out of contingency, it doesn't change our budget, and it's a relatively small amount, so.
All right.
And we have done it before for the other buildings, it's just,
But we have to do it if the city says we have to do it,
It's
so.
not
Yeah.
an option.
All right, I'd move for approval.
I'll second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth,
Yes.
Dr. Bridges.
Yes.
Mr. Jester,
Yes.
Ms. Edwards.
Yes.
Okay, proposed executive session. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I move that we adjourn to executive session.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Please.
Goodness.
Do we have a second?
Yes, Patty.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Statement of executive session minute for April 19, 2018. The Board of Education went into executive session at 5:30 p.m. Members present included Kent Jester, President, Patty Nyworth, Kelly Edwards, Dr. Lori Bridges. Other present included Tom Deegan, Superintendent. Items discussed included the employee, promoting, or receiving resignations of individuals certified and support salaried personnel, so the board can return to open session and vote to take action on personnel transactions as listed on the certified and support personnel reports. The selection of Director of Assessment and Accountability, the selection of elementary principals, the selection of middle school principals, and the selection of high school principals. During the executive session, the board discussed these items and no other items, and no action was taken. The board returned to open session at 5:55 p.m. This constitutes the minutes of the executive session. Superintendent's personnel report.
Yes. Under item 12A, I have the approval of certified and support personnel reports.
I hear a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Under item 12B, I have the approval of selection of Director of Assessment and Accountability. And for that position, I recommend Mr. Fred Roloff.
Move for approval.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Abstain.
Ms. Jester? Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Under item 12C, I have the approval of the selection of elementary principals, and for this, we have 3 positions. First recommendation will be Ms. Kim Harrison for Adams Elementary School. Second will be Ms. Lana Welch for Learning Tree Academy. And third will be Ms. Lisa Sparks, and the location is to be determined.
Move for approval.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
We're having a lot of people tonight. Item 12D, approval of the selection of middle school principal. And for this, we have 1 position for Tomlinson Middle School, and it's Tara Grandy.
Move for approval.
Who was that person?
Me.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
And item 12E, approval of the selection of high school principal. And for this, we have we are selecting 1 candidate, but we are not at this moment identifying a location. And for that, I recommend Ms. Laura Pacino.
Move for approval.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Okay. Item 13, new business.
I have no new business that I can think of.
Okay. Our next regular board meeting date is Monday, May 7th at 5 p.m. here at the Shoemaker Center Auditorium. Do we need to set any new board meeting dates?
And none that I can foresee at the moment.
Okay. Does anyone have any board announcements?
I just, looking at this list of retirements is, I mean, my goodness, we're losing the Bears and Charlotte Oaks and so many great, great professionals. It's really hard to see this happen. But it is what it is.
Yes, every year we have,
Oh, yeah. There's some great people on this list.
every year.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Thank you all.